We have some breaking news to share with you on this Tuesday, as Fox News is reporting that the Trump administration has ended the temporary protection status for Somalis in the United States. We're taking a look here at a social media post courtesy of Fox News, and Fox News Digital saying this: the Trump administration is ending temporary protection status for Somalia, affecting several thousand Somalis currently living in the U.S. and several hundred currently living in Minnesota under the protection. Somali migrants with TPS will be required to leave the country by March 17th.
The gunfire started at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in a quiet residential neighborhood on the north side of Minneapolis. The first 911 call came in seconds later. A woman's voice, panicked, barely coherent. Shots fired, multiple shots, people are down, oh my God, they're still shooting. By the time Minneapolis police arrived 3 minutes later, the street looked like a war zone. Shell casings covered the pavement. Over 200 rounds fired from multiple weapons. 4 vehicles sat abandoned in the middle of the road, doors open, windows shattered, and scattered across 2 city blocks were bodies. 24 people dead, 11 more wounded. The worst mass shooting in Minneapolis history, and what investigators discovered in the hours that followed would expose a network so disturbing, so deeply embedded in local government, that it would trigger the largest federal law enforcement operation Minnesota had ever seen. Because this wasn't gang violence. This wasn't a random act of terror. This was a coordinated execution ordered by people who were supposed to protect the community, including the mayor of a Minneapolis suburb who had been using his office to shield a Somali organized crime network for over 6 years. If this opening has you questioning everything you thought you knew about local government, tap like and comment Minneapolis shooting so I know you're following, because this story goes places you won't believe. The neighborhood where the shooting occurred was home to one of the largest Somali immigrant communities in America. Families who had fled civil war in Somalia in the 1990s and early 2000s had rebuilt their lives here, opening small businesses, raising children, contributing to the city's economy and culture. But beneath that surface of hardworking immigrant families trying to build better lives, a different reality had been growing. Federal investigators would later discover that the shooting was the violent climax of a power struggle between 2 rival Somali criminal organizations, both operating under the protection of elected officials who took bribes to look the other way. The victims weren't random. They were members of a trafficking network that controlled the distribution of counterfeit prescription pills, fentanyl pressed into tablets designed to look like Xanax, Percocet, and Adderall, across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. The shooters were members of a rival network that wanted control of those distribution routes. And the man who had allegedly given the green light for the hit? Mayor Hassan Ibrahim of Crystal, Minnesota, a small suburb just northwest of Minneapolis. A 52-year-old community leader, father of 4, and the first Somali-American mayor elected in Minnesota. A man who stood in churches and community centers promising to make the streets safer while secretly taking monthly cash payments to ensure certain criminals could operate without interference. Let that sink in for a moment. An elected mayor sworn to uphold the law, allegedly ordering a mass execution of rival drug dealers on American streets. When the first responders arrived at the scene that night, what they found was carnage unlike anything Minneapolis had seen. Victims ranged in age from 19 to 43. Most had been shot multiple times at close range. Witnesses described at least 6 shooters, all wearing dark clothing and masks, arriving in 2 vehicles and opening fire on a group gathered outside a residential building. The shooting lasted approximately 90 seconds. Then the shooters fled, leaving behind spent shell casings from at least 4 different weapons, 9mm handguns, .40 caliber pistols, and what ballistics experts later identified as rounds from an AK-47 style rifle. Minneapolis police secured the scene and began interviewing witnesses, but what quickly became clear was that no one wanted to talk. Residents who had seen the shooting refused to provide descriptions. Family members of the victims claimed they had no idea why their loved ones had been targeted. Business owners nearby suddenly developed memory problems. This wall of silence wasn't unusual in communities traumatized by violence. But as detectives pressed harder, they began to sense something different. People weren't just scared of the shooters, they were scared of something or someone else. One witness, a 34-year-old woman who lived in an apartment overlooking the shooting scene, finally broke. Speaking to detectives on condition of anonymity, she said something that changed the entire investigation. "You don't understand. The people who did this, they're protected. The mayor protects them. If I talk, I'm dead and my family is dead, and the police won't do anything because the mayor won't let them." The mayor. That single word triggered a phone call to the FBI. If you're starting to see how deep this corruption goes, comment "protected" and hit that like button. Because what the FBI uncovered made this shooting look like just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI's Minneapolis field office had actually been investigating Mayor Hassan Ibrahim for 14 months before the shooting ever happened. The investigation, codenamed Operation City Shield, had started with a tip from an informant inside the Somali community who claimed that the mayor was taking bribes from a drug trafficking organization in exchange for political protection. At first, the allegation seemed almost too brazen to be true, but as FBI agents dug deeper, they found a pattern that was impossible to ignore. Mayor Ibrahim had been elected in 2018 on a platform of community safety, youth programs, and bridging the gap between immigrant communities and law enforcement. He was charismatic, well-spoken, and genuinely beloved by many residents who saw him as proof that the American dream was real, that a refugee from Somalia could rise to lead a Minnesota city. But behind the photo ops and community events, Ibrahim had allegedly built a different kind of empire. Financial records subpoenaed by federal investigators showed that Ibrahim had received over $340,000 in unexplained cash deposits into accounts held by his wife and adult children over a 3-year period. The deposits were always under $10,000 to avoid automatic reporting requirements, a classic structuring pattern used by money launderers. Before we continue with how federal agents finally brought down this network, I need to be honest with you. Creating investigations like this takes enormous resources. This isn't just rewriting news articles. This is weeks of research, reading federal indictments, analyzing court testimony, cross-referencing local police reports with FBI documents, and verifying every detail. We're a small team dedicated to bringing you stories the mainstream media won't fully explore. Stories about how corruption reaches the highest levels of local government, how organized crime exploits immigrant communities, and how systems designed to protect us can be weaponized against us. If you want us to keep making these investigations, consider joining our channel membership. Your support directly funds the research and fact-checking that makes content like this possible. For less than a coffee each month, you'll help us continue exposing the truth. And as a member, you'll get early access to videos and exclusive content we can't publish publicly. Click the join button below. Your support is what makes this work possible. Now let's continue with how the FBI finally moved in. The mass shooting gave federal investigators the opening they needed. A crime of that magnitude couldn't be swept under the rug by a corrupt mayor. State and federal resources flooded into Minneapolis. The FBI took over the investigation from local police. And within 72 hours of the shooting, agents had identified the shooters. 6 men, all Somali nationals or Somali Americans, all with ties to the Darad network, a rival criminal organization that had been in a quiet war with the Barawi clan for control of the counterfeit pill market. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses, cell phone tower data, and ballistics evidence connected them to the crime scene, but the FBI didn't arrest them immediately. Instead, they watched, they listened, and they waited for the network to reveal itself. What they discovered was stunning. The shooters had been in contact with an intermediary, a 38-year-old logistics coordinator named Abdi Yusuf, who had allegedly been taking orders directly from Mayor Ibrahim. Phone records showed a call between Yusuf and Ibrahim at 9:34 p.m. on the night of the shooting, just over 2 hours before the attack. The call lasted 4 minutes. 90 minutes later, the shooters arrived at the target location. Federal prosecutors would later argue that this call was the final authorization for the hit. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The 24 people killed weren't all criminals. 8 of them were innocent bystanders. Family members, friends, people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when the shooting started. A 19-year-old college student home on winter break, a 43-year-old mother of 5 who worked as a nurse, a 27-year-old taxi driver waiting for his next fare. They had no involvement in drug trafficking. They were simply there when violence erupted. Their deaths were collateral damage in a war orchestrated by people who viewed human life as nothing more than a business expense. On a cold morning in February, 6 months after the shooting, federal agents executed coordinated raids across the Twin Cities metro area. 23 locations were hit simultaneously. ICE, FBI, DEA, ATF, and state troopers moved in force. Mayor Hassan Ibrahim was arrested at his home at 6:12 a.m. Agents found him in his bedroom, attempting to delete files from his phone. In his home office, they discovered $67,000 in cash hidden in a safe, along with ledgers documenting bribes received over a 4-year period. The 6 shooters were arrested at various locations. Abdi Yusuf was taken into custody at a warehouse in St. Paul. 14 other individuals connected to both the Barawi clan and the Darad network were arrested on charges ranging from drug trafficking to money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. In total, 23 people were indicted in connection with Operation City Shield. The evidence seized was overwhelming. Financial records showed the network had moved over $18 million in counterfeit pill sales over 3 years. Text messages and recorded calls documented the planning of the mass shooting. And testimony from cooperating witnesses, including 2 former Barawi clan members who agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences, painted a picture of a criminal organization that had corrupted local government to an extent rarely seen in American law enforcement. At his initial court appearance, Mayor Hassan Ibrahim stood before a federal judge and heard the charges against him: conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, bribery of a public official, obstruction of justice, and money laundering. He faced a potential sentence of life in prison without parole. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty. Ibrahim was held without bail, deemed a flight risk and a danger to the community. But as the case proceeded through the federal system, something unexpected happened. Prosecutors approached Ibrahim's defense team with an offer: plead guilty to reduced charges, cooperate fully with ongoing investigations, and receive a sentence of 35 years instead of life without parole. After 3 weeks of negotiations, Hassan Ibrahim accepted the deal.